Is it the reason why you guys are not paying whatever that vendor is?
What was it for?
Brewing discontent in Thornton. Township, Dalton, Illinois has intensified into a full-fledged political catastrophe concentrated on the problematic person. Tiffany Henyard is noted for her exaggerated demeanor and self-style. The moniker Super Mayor Henyard is currently engaged in a scandal concerning her exclusion from the Democratic nomination for township supervisor. Allegations of corruption and election interference have taken center stage, and several lawsuits were brought against her. From all directions, the consequences of the ongoing issue has the serious Henyard situation divided public opinion among her supporters, depict her as a victim of unjust political strategies, portraying her as a martyr fights against a rigged system. They say that she is being silenced in an attempt to reduce her political influence. Meanwhile, her opponents accuse her of using whatever means, regardless of the ethics or legalities, of maintaining aim. Her detractors argue that they have a strong hold on power. Hen's actions indicate a desperate attempt to maintain a position leadership in the face of mounting resistance. Many local residents are frustrated, alleging electoral interference and procedural misconduct as part of Hen's attempts to ensure her re-election. Henyard and the legal team replied by filing lawsuits alleged purposeful sabotage, unfair practices, and a calculated attempt to remove her from the ballot. Henyard framed this as a war, oppose a corrupt political machine. She claims that her Democratic Party rivals are actively working to stop her supporters from participating in the electoral process. The narrative her team has spun represents her as a brave figure standing up for justice in the face of systemic oppression. However, political insiders argue that Henyard's legal efforts are nothing more than a desperate last-ditch attempt by a politician whose grip on power is weakening. These experts suggest that Hen's lawsuits are getting worse. The current state of affairs and could alienate even her most ardent admirers, and detractors of Henyard's government contend that her leadership has been characterized by self-interest and polarization, emphasizing her past troubles with other trustees, and claims that financial mishandling, including untrustworthy spending and the abuse used township assets for private benefit. In spite of these charges, Hen's defenders honor her fortitude and resolve, portraying her as a defiant figure opposing perception. Perversion of her capacity to rally a declining number of supporters has led to a lightning rod for her before and after denunciation. But even some of her, the majority of ardent fans, are starting to there are concerns about her leadership style. Rising internal conflict reports inside the administration of Henyard, with a few of her closest supporters saying worries that she is becoming more authoritarian inclinations and her incapacity to successfully handle the township's urgent problems, such as this degradation of her inner circle, is a reflection of larger dissatisfaction. Many people in Thornton Township residents are now disenchanted with Henry's leadership and are requesting increased openness, responsibility, as well as a return to steady administration of the township, already battling unstable finances because insufficient services are now struggling with the political fallout from Henyard's conflicts. That locals have voiced annoyance with their elected representatives appear more preoccupied with personal conflicts than on attending to the urgent requirements of the political drama in the neighborhood, has additionally attracted notice outside of the Dalton's borders because of her confrontational and dramatic nature, aggressive mannerisms that are typified by defiance without remorse, and a propensity to transform every dispute into a public. She is a divisive figure due to her spectacle figure even outside the township's boundaries, making the choice to become a super mayor, whom some consider to be self-interested. An effort to increase power has attracted criticized for what is seen as its haughtiness and aspirations. In spite of the pervasive criticism, Henyard doesn't bow down. Keeps insisting that her battle is based on values rather than selfish interests. She maintains that being left out of the ballot is an outright attack on her. Advocates for democratic rights and a personal assault on her personality and her consider her struggle to be representative of a more conflict with a corrupt political structure that aims to keep people quiet, voices similar to hers. As the circumstances reveals, it's evident that Thornton political disturbance in the township is no longer only concerning Henyard's fate. It's about the more general inquiry on how the town is. Many residents are wondering about the governance. Whether the internal strife and individual, there are other vendettas occupying the center stage. Significant to their elected officials than supplying the town's basic services are efficiently provided in a continuous. The political drama is taking precedence over the essential roles of a township are already experiencing financial difficulties, future instability, and poor management. Henyard's political career is still going strong. Unsure, with certain spectators assuming that even her most devoted supporters might eventually lose interest in by her unrelenting quest for dominance. Others think that regardless of the result, the consequences of this battle will impact both in the long run. Henyard's standing and the administration of this political situation in Thornton Township keeps going. One thing is obvious. The state of affairs in Dalton has reached a boiling point, and how this is resolved crisis could potentially influence the future for many years to come. The municipality of Thornton Township is experiencing political instability. In Dalton, Illinois, there has been an uncommon and controversial occurrence in the local for the first time. The Democratic Party, for more than 30 years, a caucus was convened. Rather than the usual primary election causing a lot of conjecture and dispute the choice to call a caucus, in particular with the political stakes so high and many issues were raised by the timing. Especially considering the consequences it views on the impending caucus election, was arranged under the direction of Township Democrat and State Senator Committeeman Napoleon Harris, has a lot of consider the maneuver to be a planned attempt to discredit Mayor Tiffany Henyard's goals, and at the end question her authority. Henyard, in a very contentious but resolute individual, had been trying to get a place on for the AIL election. Democratic ballot, nevertheless, the caucus proved to be an unforeseen and daunting challenge according to sources. Harris and his, in a sense, the backer, organized the caucus. That specifically left out the Henyard slate of applicants are a crucial prerequisite for a certified assessor's nomination was absent. Without this, from Henyard's team, crucial element in her bid for the Democratic nomination was declared invalid and void, so excluding her from despite the disqualification. The ballot seemed to have been founded on a technicality. Many viewed it as a purposeful and politically driven action intended to change the leadership dynamic in the township in support of Harris. Exploiting Harris' disqualification for Henyard's, he put himself forward in his slate of candidates, pledging that his group will be listed as a Democratic nominee now. The early repercussions were dire. Henyard sees the relocation as more for her. It's more than just a political defeat. It was an outright assault on her power and role as mayor, and her followers saw it, however, as a component of a bigger the party establishment's attempt to quiet, throwing out opinions, and undermining under her direction. The choice to host instead of a primary election, a caucus, has generated a great deal of controversy according to the Henyard squad. The caucus method was purposefully selected to erect obstacles to her re-election. They emphasized in their campaign that the caucus Thornton Township had not utilized it for decades before its abrupt adoption seemed shady and calculated. Supporters of Henyard asserted that the more inclusive caucus structure and opaque was created for the purpose of Harris and his backers by staying away from public examination and restricting the quantity number of participants in the selection. Caucus method detractors contend that it was less typical and less broader than a primary election, in which a more extensive and varied collection of instead voters may have taken part. During the caucus, a smaller, more focused group restricting the larger community feedback for fans of Henyard voters perceived this exclusion as repression, as well as a lack of concern for according to Democratic norms. The caucus was a tactic that was not democratic, intended to mute their sounds and stop Henyard from reserving her spot. Harris and his supporters are on the ballot, yet support the choice to have a caucus, claiming it was a useful action to guarantee more capable leadership for the township. They kept up that the outcome was Henyard's disqualification of her own inability to fulfill the required needs, as well as provided a more equitable and well-structured procedure for selecting the Democratic contenders. In their perception of Henyard's inability to meet the regulations weren't a part of any plan, but instead a matter of preparedness and following the prescribed procedure. To the caucus's fallout has revealed severe rifts in the community, allegations of voter corruption, manipulation, and the decline of Democratic. The use of standards has expanded throughout, while Thornton Township and beyond. Henyard's detractors see the result as essential and valid action to eliminate an executive whose term has been characterized by dispute, which her followers view as a deliberate assault on the democratic procedure. They contend that the exclusion of Henyard from the ballot is a component of an overall political elite's attempt to eliminate a leader who has the courage to question the current political crisis as status quo, as has important consequences for the Henyard's career. Despite being shut out, she is still absent from the Democratic ballot. Stubborn and is portraying herself as a Henyard's victim of systemic injustice, the option has not been ruled out by the team of questioning the legitimacy of the caucus or independent running candidate in the election scheduled for April. Despite the setback, Henyard's insistence on not giving up because the battle has solidified her as a divisive figure among her followers, supporting her as an advocate for democracy. But her detractors view her as a polarizing somebody whose tenure has done Napoleon Harris more harm than good, whose deeds have reinforced his status as a governing authority. And currently, Thornton Township is the criticism from those who observe his strategies as compromising the democratic process. but his backers defend his behavior if required to keep the township stable so that others can see it. Him as a political symbol manipulation of the dispute pertaining to a chain reaction has been sparked by the caucus, impacting more than just the candidates engaged as well as the larger electorate. Thornton Township's circumstances are a definite sign of a political structure that is prepared to put political advantage over the requirements of the community as the election in April addresses the conflicts inside the township is still simmering, with locals wondering if the government's emphasis on resolving individual and political scores are taking precedence. The community's more pressing demands, the result of this political conflict, may eventually influence the course of the township. But the uncertainty for now survives, as well as the voters having lost faith in the procedure, is the government always does it, is to go and look into nearby folks. As Mayor Tiffany Henyard has stated that she won't be easily vanquished following their expulsion from the Thorn Democratic caucus in the township tension-filled environment, as she blamed the foul play meeting outlining the whole procedure as a premeditated conspiracy arranged by Senator Napoleon of the state, according to Henyard's reports. Harris called for accountability, slamming Harris' leadership and phoning the incident a conscious effort to deny her supporters the right to vote and take away her from the competition. In spite of Hanen's charges of electoral interference, Harris and his group became a definite winners, guaranteeing their place in the meanwhile. Henyard's name and the April ballot, her incomplete list of candidates, were eliminated due to procedural issues, including the failure to present a certified assessor. Infuriated, Henyard wasted no time in portraying the caucus as a political assault aimed at derailing her career. She accused Harris of rigging the election with dishonest tactics to maintain control over the township's democratic machine. Not one to back down, Henyard vowed to challenge the results through legal action, claiming that the caucus process was an insult to democracy and her ambitions. She argued that her exclusion was part of a larger pattern of voter suppression and corruption within the township's political system, promising to sue all parties involved in what she described decried as an illegal, undemocratic. Carried Henyard fierce reaction, marked by emotional and calculated language, framed her struggle as a fight for justice. She contended that the use of a caucus, an election method that hadn't been used in Thorn Township for more than 30 years, was a deliberate attempt to keep her name off the ballot. She argued that the decision to deviate from the traditional primary election process made it clear that she would not let the process stand. She has strongly vowed to hold accountable those involved in what she describes as a blatant violation of her rights and the rights of her supporters in doing so. She has positioned herself as a champion of the disenfranchised and marginalized members of the community, urging her followers to continue fighting. The caucus controversy has generated a wide range of opinions. Some of Han's detractors argue that she is using accusations of voter suppression to deflect attention from her own leadership failures. Critics point to her inability to prepare a full slate of candidates and argue that this procedural oversight was the main reason for her exclusion. They assert that breaking the rules does not constitute voter suppression, and that Henyard's leadership flaws are at the heart of her downfall. Moreover, Henyard's administration has been under intense scrutiny, with accusations of financial misconduct and embezzlement surfacing. A report alleged that Henyard used taxpayer funds to make extravagant purchases, including $30,000 in Amazon charges in one day. Other reports indicated that Henyard had spent around $100,000 on travel, meals, and other personal expenses, raising concerns about financial mismanagement. These rise have led to calls for Henyard resignation, with some community members even describing her as the worst mayor in America. Of the financial state of Dalton, where Henyard also served as mayor, further highlights the challenges of her leadership under her direction. The village's finances deteriorated, with the general fund balance falling from over $5 million to a deficit of nearly $4 million in just 2 years. Investigations uncovered excessive overtime pay for police officers, and reports indicate that Henyard's communication style contributed to tensions within the village board, where she has. Moreover, Henyard's administration has been under intense scrutiny, with accusations of financial misconduct and embezzlement surfacing. A report alleged that Henyard used taxpayer funds to make extravagant purchases, including $30,000 in Amazon charges in one day. Other reports indicated that Henyard had spent around $100,000 on travel, meals, and other personal expenses, raising concerns about financial mismanagement. These controversies have led to calls for Henyard's resignation, with some community members even describing her as the worst mayor in America. The financial state of Dalton, where Henyard also served as mayor, further highlights the challenges of her leadership under her direction. The village's finances deteriorated, with the general fund balance fallen from over $5 million to a deficit of nearly $4 million In just 2 years, investigations uncovered excessive overtime pay for police officers, and reports indicate that Han's communication style contributed to tensions within the village board, where she has been accused of bullying and suppressing her critics amid growing opposition. Henyard supporters argue that she is being unfairly targeted by a political machine intent on silencing her. They believe that the caucus was rigged to remove her from the race because of her influence among key voter groups. For them, the fight over the caucus represents much more than a nomination. It's a battle to preserve their leader and prevent the establishment from undermining the will of the people. Despite the scandals and growing mistrust surrounding her leadership, Henyard has vowed to continue fighting to retain her job as mayor and supervisor of Thorn Township. Legal experts warned that the court dispute could drag on for months, further dividing an already fractured community and costing taxpayers more money. Meanwhile, Harris and other candidates are intensifying their campaigns, with some predicting that Henyard's chances of winning are slim as the political drama unfolds. The future of Thorn Township remains uncertain, shaped by the ongoing battle over Hen's exclusion and the larger questions of leadership corruption and democratic integrity. Supporters of Henyard have hinted at plans to challenge the results of the caucus in court, citing numerous irregularities and violations of the rules. Ali Keith Price, a star reporter of Henyard, called the caucus the biggest fraud he had ever witnessed, pointing out that hundreds of Henyard supporters were left outside the venue, unable to participate. Election lawyer Carcraft Kier has also raised concerns, calling for an investigation into the caucus procedures. He pointed out rule violations, including the lack of documentation to prove voter eligibility, which he believes should have been required for the event. Despite Henyard's claims of voter suppression and fraud, critics argue that she is deflecting attention from her own leadership shortcomings. They point out that Henyard had ample time to prepare for the caucus, including submitting a full slate of candidates, one of the key requirements for being on the ballot. Furthermore, Hang's claims about Harris and his associates manipulating the caucus to keep her off the ballot are undermined by her failure to include a professional assessor on her slate, a basic mistake that contributed to her exclusion. One local resident remarked that breaking the law is not the same as suppressing votes, highlighting Han's lack of preparedness as a contributing factor to her removal from the ballot. The scandal surrounding Han's exclusion from the caucus has sparked more extensive discussions about her leadership style, which has drawn sharp criticism from her detractors. While Henyard portrays herself as a champion of the people opposing the political establishment, her actions and rhetoric have only served to further polarize the community. Critics argue that her combative and aggressive tactics have overshadowed her ability to lead with calm and reason. These critics claim that Han's leadership has been marked by a disregard for political norms when they don't align with her goals. Accusations of a hostile takeover, along with Han's calls for Harris to man up and her label of Harris as a coward, have done little to build confidence in her leadership. Although Henyard supporters maintain that her exclusion from the ballot was a result of a political conspiracy to undermine her authority, her polarizing behavior has eclipsed many of the efforts she has made to improve the township. Some locals question whether her leadership is ultimately benefiting or harming the community. They assert that Harris and his associates deliberately manipulated the caucus procedures to prevent Henyard from running because they knew she had significant influence over key voter groups. For these supporters, the fight over the caucus is about much more than just securing the nomination. It represents an existential battle to protect a leader they believe is being unfairly targeted by the political establishment. Henyard supporters had expressed disbelief that she has been singled out for her accomplishments, arguing that her exclusion was a result of political maneuvering designed to topple a popular leader. Rumors about Han's next move have gone viral, and many of her supporters are convinced that the damage to her reputation will be irreversible. However, some are still holding out hope that she can mount a comeback, possibly through a write-in campaign. Despite the growing concerns surrounding her leadership, there is still uncertainty about whether such a campaign would be enough to resolve the scandals that continue to plague her administration. As the situation continues to unfold there are growing concerns about whether Henyard will seek to retain her job as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thorn Township. Even among her opponents, who acknowledge her ability to galvanize certain segments of the population, there are questions about. Some residents may be unfamiliar with caucuses because Thorn Township has not held one in decades, but he argued that the process is valid and has been used successfully in other areas. In response to Henyard's accusations, Harris rejected the claims, asserting the caucus was not rigged and that Hen's exclusion was due to her failure to meet the necessary requirements. Despite Harris' defense of the caucus, the aftermath of the event has had severe consequences for Han's political career. Her legal team is preparing to contest the results in court, alleging that the rules were applied arbitrarily and that Henyard's exclusion was part of a pre-arranged plan. The scandal has also brought Henyard's leadership under intense scrutiny, particularly regarding allegations of financial misconduct during her tenure as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thorne Township Henyard, has been accused of embezzling taxpayer funds for personal expenses, with one particularly damning report claiming that she spent over $30,000 on Amazon purchases using the town's credit card in a single day. Other reports indicate that she spent around $100,000 on travel meals and other personal expenses. These revelations have led some community members to call for her resignation, with some even dubbing her the worst mayor in America. Under Henyard's leadership, Dalton's finances have deteriorated, with the general fund balance falling from over $5 million to nearly a $4 million deficit in just 2 years. Investigations also uncovered cases of excessive overtime pay for police officers, one officer's overtime exceeding double their annual salary. As Henyard leadership has come under scrutiny, her relationship with the Dalton Village Board has also been marked by tension. Henyard has been accused of bullying and repressing critics within the board, which has contributed to an atmosphere of dysfunction. At a recent board meeting, Henyard reportedly said, "I am your mayor," a statement that caused many people in the audience to leave or turn against her. These tensions have added to perception that Henyard's leadership style is marked by a disregard for open dialogue and collaboration. The growing controversies surrounding Henyard's leadership have caught the attention of federal authorities. The FBI is currently investigating Henyard for alleged financial misconduct, including the possible misuse and embezzlement of public funds. As part of the investigation, the FBI has already interviewed Henyard extensively and subpoenaed documents related to her spending. Additionally, Henyard's ally Keith Price may also be a target of federal prosecutors after being investigated on bankruptcy fraud charges. Despite the mounting opposition and growing calls for her resignation, Henyard has declared that she will continue fighting to keep her job as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thorne Township. She has stated that many of her neighbors have voiced their displeasure with her leadership, but she remains resolute in her determination to stand by her supporters. However, Henyard's critics argue that the continued legal battle over the caucus results will only further divide an already fractured community, with taxpayers footing the bill for an ongoing dispute. As the campaign for the supervisor position in Thorne Township intensifies, with Paris and other candidates vying for control, some residents have expressed their frustration with the political system. One user stated that Henyard should not be in charge at all, calling her actions fraud and insisting that she should never be allowed to run for public office again. Christopher Clark, an independent candidate for the position, faces significant challenges in winning over voters in a community that has been deeply divided by scandal and controversy. Many believe that Henyard's time as mayor and supervisor is over, and that she will not be elected in the upcoming election. The political landscape in Thorne Township is now at a crossroads, with Henyard's future hanging in the balance. While her support remain loyal, the scandals and controversies surrounding her leadership have left